Taking you back now to the White House, where House Speaker Mike Johnson is speaking following the congressional leaders meeting with President Biden. Let's watch.
Literally around the clock to get that job done. We're very optimistic. I hope that the other leaders came out here and told you the same. We believe that we can get to agreement on these issues and prevent a government shutdown, and that's our first responsibility. You also heard, I'm sure, that there was discussion about the supplemental spending package, and I was very clear with the President and all those in the room that the House is actively pursuing and investigating all the various options on that, and we will address that in a timely manner. But again, the first priority of the country is our border and making sure it's secure. I believe the President can take executive authority right now today to change that, and I told him that again today in person, as I've said to him many times, publicly and privately over the last several weeks. It's time for action. It is a catastrophe, and it must stop. And we will get the government funded, and we'll keep working on that. So we'll have more for you soon.
Your mind on government funding for more money for budget. And we have been listening there to House Speaker Mike Johnson at the podium. This was following a meeting of congressional leaders, along with President Biden and Vice President Harris. We heard earlier from the Democrats, but Johnson there saying he's very optimistic of a deal before the partial government shutdown deadline, which is on Friday. The House Speaker saying that America's top priority is securing the border, a major sticking point in these negotiations. And CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane joins us again from Capitol Hill. Scott, we were talking before about this meeting and how to evaluate its form of success. So what do you take away from what Johnson just said and the fact that he was out there on his own?
That's very telling, Nancy. We mentioned a few minutes ago that it'd be interesting to see if Speaker Johnson and Republican leader Mitch McConnell walk out together. They didn't, as is customary, that they'd walk out together. There's obviously a divide here among Republican leadership over what to do about Ukraine funding. Mitch McConnell, according to Chuck Schumer, was among those leaning on Speaker Johnson to move forward with a vote on Ukraine aid as part of this behind closed doors Oval Office meeting. They walked out separately, an indication that that divide remains. Speaker Johnson didn't take questions. He said that the president should and can take executive action to address the border and that U.S. border security concerns are still primary, a first priority, giving no timetable as to when he'd address the issue of Ukraine funding. It's just noteworthy, striking, that the Republican leadership exited this meeting separately. You just don't see that in this type of traditional setup.
Especially when time is ticking. What needs to happen right now? Because I know the deadline is 12 a.m. on Saturday. It's Friday, which some may say is a few days away. But things need to start happening at this very moment.
Presumably, there'd have to be something put together formally by 11:59 p.m. tonight, because traditionally it takes about 72 hours for a bill to mature from being drafted to being voted on and approved, if the House rules are to be followed and if Senate tradition and its parliamentary tools are to be followed. There was a bullishness noticeable from the three people who've spoken so far. Senate Majority Leader Schumer, House Democratic Leader Jeffries, and Speaker Mike Johnson, that there's a consensus. A government shutdown must be avoided. There is nobody who benefits from a government shutdown, and politically it can be very challenging if somebody takes blame for a shutdown, and nobody wants that. So there is probably a new optimism based on what we've heard from this meeting among those tracking this government shutdown issue, according to what they've heard today.
You know, Scott, it's interesting you say that, because there are people who are, I don't know if you would say that they're pushing for a government shutdown, but they're saying that maybe this might be the right move politically in order to get where we need to go in the long term. So can you talk a little bit about that in terms of Johnson having to rally his own troops here?
I think that is a safe thing to say, Nancy. I think there is a small contingent of House Republicans who are inviting the prospect of a shutdown, urging for one, because they say it's leverage to help exact bigger changes that they think would not only benefit their districts, but benefit the country. There's a group of House Freedom Caucus members who have been strident in their arguments that the government needs to spend less money, that significant budget cuts are needed to avoid inflating the deficit further, and that a government shutdown is a tool to get to that result. And it may be in some parts of America where a government shutdown is seen as a political positive among some constituencies, those who have some type of frustration with Washington or a desire to see Washington do less and spend less, a government shutdown may be politically advantageous for some members of Congress. But based on what we've heard coming out of this meeting, that is not a view shared by the Speaker or any other leader in Congress. So the prospects of a government shutdown are dwindling based on the readout we got just now. And that's important, Nancy, because what we heard this weekend was a hint, if not a more outward sign of pessimism, that talks had broken down. There is at least a consensus, something needs to be done promptly to avoid this.
Yeah, we will take the optimism where we can. Scott, I'm curious, when you talk about a negotiation, obviously it involves concessions and some sort of agreement. What kind of concessions could be on the table here?
I think among the things that are negotiable is timetables to do this again. And one of the things you can always negotiate is how long do we want to do this for? Do we want to just agree to disagree on some things and keep government funding for a few more weeks so we can negotiate further? Do we agree to disagree on big pillar things, but we can agree to at least keep funding where it is for a few more months? The negotiation is likely over how long to plan this out, how long to move the goalposts. I don't think they're going to have the capacity to negotiate on the bigger issues, the bigger wedge issues, like Republican pushes to defund programs that are priorities of the Biden administration, climate change programs, abortion services for service members, also for the programs that they've put in place over the past few years to build new infrastructure. I don't think Democrats are going to negotiate over issues that may lead to more abortion restrictions, that may lead to cuts to more diversity and inclusion programs. So they may just have to extend the timeline at best.
Scott MacFarlane, always appreciate your insight. Thank you very much. And CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang is at the White House. Weijia, we heard you ask a question there after Schumer came out and spoke. What was your takeaway from their statements?
Honestly, Nancy, despite the passion that they were talking, and describing this meeting, it didn't sound like the ball really moved very far ahead, especially when it comes to providing more funding for Ukraine, because the message has always been the exact same thing we heard today from Senator Schumer, even though he said this was one of the most intense meetings he's ever been to at the White House. I asked him why that was, and he said because there was so much passion and fervor about the need to provide more funding and resources to Ukraine, that he and Leader Jeffries and Mitch McConnell even were all making the same message. So it became apparent to me that it was Speaker Johnson that continued to resist, and that's nothing new. And so even though this meeting, they all say, was very productive, I think we have to remember there are two issues here. One is whether they're going to extend funding to keep the government open, and all parties seem to indicate that they were going to reach a deal to get that done. But the second was the issue of providing this aid to Ukraine. And again, it doesn't sound like the ball went anywhere there, because Speaker Johnson came out as well and said, until we prioritize the border, until there are, significant changes there, even though he didn't explicitly say this, Nancy, he essentially said that they weren't going to consider Ukraine aid, that they would do that in due time. The problem is President Biden says there is no more time left, that we have to address this head on right now. So in terms of progress, it's difficult to see what the path forward is. I will say that Speaker Johnson said he met one-on-one with President Biden, which would be their first one-on-one face-to-face meeting. So we're still waiting to hear from the White House about how that conversation went, at least their take on it. But so far, we haven't gotten a statement yet. So that is progress, because the two leaders are talking to each other. But in terms of what they're going to get done, that's a much bigger question mark.
And I know so many Americans would be impacted by this, but if a shutdown were to happen, is that more of a loss for Biden or the House Speaker?
Well, I think you'll see both parties try to spin it in their direction and blame the other one, because the problem is that the far right wing of House Republicans have issued, as Scott was talking about, a long list of their demands that they want in order to strike a deal to keep the government open. And many of those things on the list are priorities of the president and the Democratic lawmakers. And so it's tough to see the wiggle room there. And so they're all working on this and trying to find a solution. But I think in the end, it'll be the American public that loses out, because the last government shutdown, based on our records that we just pulled, cost $11 billion. So it is an expensive and pricey, complication, and many would argue that it's for political reasons only. And so there is still time left. I know you guys had a good calendar up to show just how much, and there's not that much time left, but it's really, there's going to be plenty of blame to go around if the government shuts down, which is exactly why we heard from all of the members who were in that meeting today saying that they don't want that to happen.
Absolutely. Weijia Jiang, thank you very much.
Sure.